Right now, let's turn to Josh Mendelsohn, the CEO of Hawkfish. It's a data analytics firm that was started by Michael Bloomberg that came into the spotlight during his presidential run. The company doing digital work for pro-Biden super PACs and the DNC. Hawkfish's ultimate objective is trying to close the digital divide for Democrats by engaging specific parts of the electorate and motivating them to take action. Josh, let's start in Florida. You just held an online briefing on Wednesday focused specifically on the need to motivate black voters there. You were joined by the group Black PAC. What is Hawkfish's data showing you right now about black voters specifically in Florida?
Across the state of Florida, there's been historic rates of participation, and that exists for black voters as well. And yet, one of the areas that gives us a bit of concern and warranted us wanting to talk about it and dig in a bit deeper is the fact that you have black voters, while they are participating at very high rates on an absolute basis, are still underperforming, for example, their white and Hispanic counterparts across the state of Florida. So by way of example, black men are participating about 5% lower than white men. And that's something that gives us pause. For Democrats, the key to winning in the state of Florida, which is an increasingly diversifying state, but a state that's split about 50-50, it's going to come down to turnout. And Democrats need to turn out communities of color and young people. They're traditionally quite good at it, but it's going to come down to, just a small number of votes, yet again, in the state of Florida. And Democrats need to make sure that they can get as much turnout as possible among the black community.
Josh, can you explain a little bit more about how Hawkfish does its modeling? I mean, I know some of it's probably proprietary, but what you can share, could you share it with us about how you guys go about your modeling?
So our view is that the data matters, and understanding what the electorate is concerned about and what they're thinking about, what they want to know more about, and then ultimately, and as we find ourselves in these 4 days prior to the election, how to then also help educate voters on what they need to do in order to vote successfully. And so we spend a lot of time both understanding what voters are seeking, that information they want to know about a given candidate to help persuade them, and then ultimately what is that information they need in order to mobilize them, get that vote ultimately counted. And so we spend a lot of time focused on digital media because that's where folks are paying attention. That's where they can click and learn more. So it starts with registration. It then becomes about those ballot requests. And then ultimately it's about helping a voter move through the funnel as they take their ballot and make sure it's sent back and that ballot is counted. That's what we try to excel at every day. The Trump team was phenomenally good in 2016 at using technology and digital tactics to advance themselves despite a major cash disparity. And so our hope is to help close that gap in both little and big ways.
Your group coined the term red mirage, this idea that because more Democrats may vote by mail and more Republicans may vote in person on election day, it will look like Trump is winning on election night. How do you get people to understand that idea, especially when we're hearing the president say he wants this whole thing over on election night?
It's such a dilemma. So as you point out, Democrats are about 2.5 times more likely to vote by mail. They told us this several months ago. It has borne out in the states where we have early vote data. Republicans, both because of some of the mistrust that Trump has sown about the vote by mail process, which you talked about earlier in your program, are much more inclined to vote in person, which means ultimately those machine counts, which are what you see by and large on election night, are likely in a close race to have Donald Trump overperforming relative to his actual performance once all the ballots are counted. And so you have states like Florida where they count as they receive ballots, they start processing them, and that's quite helpful. It means on election night, they'll be able, as polls close, to produce a more robust picture of performance for both candidates. But in a state like Pennsylvania, they've been quite clear that because they don't start processing those ballots until election day. It's going to take several days thereafter. And again, because this race is so tight across the country, it's really going to come down to being prepared and recognizing that we're not going to know on election night who the ultimate winner is. And yet the president has messaged time and time again that he plans to declare victory on election night, and he will call into question, and has already, anything that differs from those counts on election night. And we call it a red mirage.
Josh, thank you. And I'm certainly not trying to provide any advice on how to run your firm, but it would seem as if you're the only person that works at Hawkfish. Where is everyone?
Like so many technology companies, when COVID happened, we took advantage of the things we're good at and sent folks to distribute on their way, because particularly the 4 days out, the last thing we want to do is get folks sick.
All right, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Glad you guys are being safe. Josh, thank you.